Hello, this is Harry Watt, North Carolina State University Wood Products Extension. This is the National Firewood Workshop 2021. The topic of this session is the basics of a successful firewood business. And this is a workshop sponsored by the Wood Education and Resource Center of Princeton, West Virginia. It's a unit of the U.S. Forest Service. The host here is North Carolina State University Wood Products Extension. And the whole purpose is to assist people in the firewood business to be successful. I have a slideshow that I'm going to present here, and this will last approximately 15 minutes. The topic here is you're supposed to be able to make money in the firewood business, and that's why we often describe the success of a firewood business as being the how profitable it is. And we would like to give everything that we can to help you in the firewood business be successful. And every person who's in the business defines success a different way. For some people, if they made in a small business $50,000 a year, they would think they were the king of the mountain. And other people, if they made 50, they thought they were a great failure. The Wood Education Center is the sponsor for this project. It's a series of 7 workshops. 3 are National Firewood workshops. One was the one in Epsom, New Hampshire, held several years ago. Last year we were supposed to be in Tennessee as this year, but with the virus we've had to go to Zoom this year. The work here is based on a grant, and we do not discriminate against anybody in any way here with the Work Center and also with NC State Wood Products Extension. One of the interesting things that you can look when you start looking at statistics of burning firewood is where in the U.S. do we burn firewoods? And amazingly, we burn more firewood in the northern states and in the mountains. And all that kind of makes common sense. And this is a 2012 map from the U.S. Census Bureau that lists the percentage of homes heated by wood. And as you go north, the highest one is Maine at 13.7%. I'm sorry, Vermont at 17.8, Maine's 13.7. And as you go to the west, you look at Montana at 9.2. And surprisingly, they're showing Alaska at 6.6, which you would think that would actually be a lot higher number. But as you look at the other states, I'm in North Carolina, 2.2 is the number that we look at. If you look at South Carolina, they're lower, Virginia's higher. So as you go north, it goes higher. And as you go south, it gets to be less. Now, this may change slightly. This is the homes heated by wood. It doesn't include what is used for campfires and outdoor uses, recreation, and so forth. But it's an interesting statistic that it shows that we have a lot of room for growth in firewood if we want to pursue market growth. But you really have to be good at the business basics. You got to put your time in. You've got to be able, you can't say, well, I'm in the firewood business and you're working 10 hours a week and claiming that's your primary income. You do want to keep a lot of good records. You need to keep up with your time. You need to keep up with the money, and you need to keep up with the inventory, logs coming in, firewood going out. You have to be good at answering the phone, handling online inquiries. And anytime you make a promise, you need to be able to keep it. And you do have to pay attention both to your customers and your employees. There are some general rules if you're in the forestry and wood products industry. As a rule, we have lots of competition. Just about anything that you can do, somebody else nearby is probably doing the same thing or close to it. So competition is a real challenge for all of us. But it also happens to be in firewood, other than the long national distance you have with the bundle business, a lot of the firewood is local. So as you get away in distance from your location, you have less competition. There is a high focus on price most of the time, but not all the time and not everywhere. Price seems to make less an issue with smaller pieces of split wood and so forth, like the bundle wood. You also have to realize that you're not a single product or a single buyer customer base most of the time. Now, there are bundle businesses that sell through one marketing channel, maybe to one company, but that's not the normal for most of us. Most of us are working with multiple products and multiple customer bases. But we have to understand that every business is unique. You can have two firewood businesses with exactly the same equipment, using the same wood right across the street from each other, but they would not be competing if one was in, say, a market like the bundle business doing independent stores and another one selling national. They're not competing other than maybe materials and labor, but they're not competing in the customer base. What we ought to look at is what has the lumber industry done, because the lumber industry has been around in industrial capabilities here a long time. And one of the things that they've learned is you have to be productive, you got to have the flow. And usually in a sawmill, there's a bottleneck, and it's where we take the logs and we first break them down, and we call that the head rig. After that, all the machining processes, each one is faster, so the wood gets out of the way. And going into it, where you have the debarker, there's a big log deck, and the debarker always has a log ready for the head rig. So the bottleneck in firewood is usually the dry kill. And it's common for a dry kill to cost more than the processor. So typically what we do, if you're in a bundle business situation and you're using a dry kill, is the dry kill sets the pace. You process ever how much wood it takes to keep the dry kill going, unless you're selling green wood, which is a way to grow your business without having to put it through the dry kill. But what the lumber people can teach us is every board that goes through the sawmill has a person looking at it, determining its grade, and then they have a sorting system that wood goes in a certain location. Now, in the photo there, that is a bay sorter, and it's common to have a 60 bay sorter in lumber. And the reason you do that is because there is, every step of the way, there's always somebody that'll pay a little bit more. And you can sort lumber, of course, by the length. You can do it by the thickness. You can do it by the species. You can do it by the grade. We should be doing the same thing in firewood. A really ugly, junky wood, maybe where all the knots congregated in the log, that just shatter going through a multiple blade processor wedge, maybe that's the person that wants to beat us up on price. The prettiest wood we should get a lot more for. And if we're selling wood to the restaurants and to some high-end buyers, then they're going to want the pretty wood. So if we can separate our wood coming out of the processor and the dry kill, we can find people that's going to pay more, and that'll help us in our bottom line profitability. So when we look at each piece, we want to have a flow, because when we come out of the processor, we have wood flying, and it's got to go somewhere. Of course, we want to try to clean it, get the sawdust out, the small slivers and splitters and things. And if you can do it automatically with a tumbler or a grate separator, then that makes the processing of the wood a lot better. But we want to think about our labor costs, how many times we handle it. Does it go into a pile? Do we have to move it again? Can we load baskets off the conveyor? We really want to challenge ourselves. And one of our speakers in this series told us that, you know, you're looking for seconds, how can you save seconds? And you're looking for pennies, how can you save pennies? So it's all a big deal. So on the left, what you see, and it's really hard to see, but you look at that photo, there's a really critical piece of equipment there called a pivot conveyor. And a pivot conveyor has powered wheels out there that's holding it up, and they can be powered by electricity or hydraulics. But that pivot conveyor, it has a pin hooked to the processor right where you're coming out of the splitter. And that conveyor will pivot to the right or to the left. And what the great advantage of a pivot conveyor is, you can load a truck and not have to stop the processor to move it going down the bed of the truck or the trailer, or you can set up different piles. These are something that's been very common in the sand and gravel industry, where they'll work for several hours, make a pile, uh, take a moment, move that conveyor 10 feet, make another pile, another pile, another pile. We need to be doing the same thing here in firewood. We don't want to stop the processor just because the truck's full or you need to switch the truck out. These things are really, really uh, useful, and I'm beginning to see them out in the firewood locations that I get to visit. So what you can do is come up with your own grading system, and it's going to be a ABC, high, medium, low. The pretty wood is going to be all splits. It'll be pretty splits. And by the time you get to the low grade, the economy grade, the knotty, the crooked stuff, that's the one when somebody comes in and wants you to beat you on price, that's where you need to send them. Don't send them the pretty wood at the low price. Your your customers will determine what your grades are, and as your grades change over time and customers over time, that's okay. I mean, it shouldn't be something written in stone. If you look at the photo on the left, that's a way to try to cut the labor out of moving firewood. You one time put it in the pallet rack. It's not moving. You can move it from now on with a forklift efficiently. And on the right, you have this huge pile of firewood that somebody split and piled up. And now you're going to have to go in there and deal with it with a front end loader just to do anything with it. So is that a good thing, a bad thing? Some people think you can season firewood in a pile like that. I don't believe that. I think you need air. And if you look there on the bottom of the photo, you see a nice pool of water. So anytime you're dumping firewood on concrete, dirt, pavement, there's an uphill and a downhill. So all the rain that falls uphill runs into the pile. So you're just not going to get the kind of drying that we're having to go to. We're getting more and more people that want firewood dry when they get it. There's always the smart person that buys their wood 2 years ahead of time and puts it in a covered building with plenty of air. But that's not always the common case. If we're going to market, we always want to think about the metro areas. And practically everybody in the U.S. can get to a metro area in a few hours. On the East Coast, you can get to a metro area sometimes in less than an hour, depending on where you live. But a couple things about the urban area is it is a great place to get wood. Every year, there's a lot of trees in the urban forest. They die. They need to come out for development, etc. The arborists are a great group to work with. They want to get rid of this, but you have to understand that a forest tree and an urban tree is not always the same. The forest tree is less likely to have limbs, and we in the firewood industry use the upper parts of a tree, the lower grade logs, but they could still be a forest tree, be straight, where the urban ones branch out a lot quicker, and we can process large limbs in our processors. The arborists always don't necessarily cut the logs and limbs up in the ways that we would like, because their goal is to get the tree down on the ground and get it off the owner's property. Whereas our goal is to put it on a processor and run it through splitting or split it with a splitter and bucket by a chainsaw. But the metro areas do have a lot of high income people. They don't want a huge amount of firewood, so they're not as price sensitive as rural people may be. We do have a growing trend in firewood in restaurants. And so we don't have to only sell in the rural areas. We can do a lot of our firewood otherwise. In the in the rural areas, you are tended to find a lot of people just got their own firewood. So when you're selling, you may be selling to people that aren't used to paying a lot. But you have to understand what your costs are in any value added service. The more you do for them, the higher price needs to be. So your question is always to ask, who can appreciate what I bring to the market? The domestic hot water heating and space heating is a market so large we can never meet that with firewood. The typical household's 2.4 people. The typical people pay about $1,500 a year for this. We can we can heat a home for about $400 a year is what our survey reports and research has shown. So people burn firewood can save money. They do have more work than just turning the knob on the thermostat. So this is a market that could be growing, and we as an industry need to pay attention to it. We do have 3 financial statements we need to be closely attuned to: the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow. We got to pay attention to the money and understand what these reports tell us. We need to see that we are profitable, and we do have to watch whether we're making money year round. So developing a summer business such as outside wood is a good thing for us. If you ever go to business school, we have the break-even curve, and what it really teaches us is we have to watch our fixed costs, which is things like our equipment, our insurance, leases, etc., because that makes it more important for us to get the volume. But once we cover those costs, our volume helps us. So if you're at the break-even point and you start increasing your sales, you will quickly add profitability. So there's always an incentive to get out there and get more volume. I would like to end this discussion by saying that pay attention to your business and you can be successful, and do catch more of these videos today here at the National Firewood Workshop. Thank you.